Hi, everyone. Just want to let you know that this episode deals with mental illness and briefly mentions eating disorders. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, you can reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 24 hours a day by dialing 988. Well, hello there, everybody. It's Michael Osinski.
And it's also Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11. It's a podcast that Michael and I do. You might have heard. It's about music. And we have people on and we have them make their case for what they believe is a perfect album.
So perfect, in fact, that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
Nope.
No way.
And it's been a great start to our fourth season. Having a lot of fun. Good to get back into it, right? You enjoying it?
And I've found myself getting more emotionally involved in the albums this season for some reason.
Agreed.
Like I just this album that we're talking about this week made me angry, not because of the music or because of the artist, but because of the way people treated the artist. But yeah, I've been a music empath, Tyler, this season. I've just been really connecting with things on a deeper level.
As you should. Yes. Life's too short not to do that, in my opinion. And I would say that our guest today, who makes their case for this album, came at it with all the right questions, all the right emotional connections too. And who is that, Michael? I'm going to talk about them, but
well, it's Gracie Meier.
It's Gracie Meier. Gracie Meier is our friend. She's a photographer, producer, technician, musician, actor, administrator, accidental viral charcuterie sensation, and an all-around good time, currently stomping ground in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she is the creative director and a founding member of the Exodus Ensemble, an immersive theater company. As a photographer, Gracie works primarily with Meow Wolf and New Mexico United Soccer, and her work has been featured in Vice UK and on RuPaul's Drag Race, which you might have heard of. You can find her online at The Real Slim Gracie or IRL, currently starring in a murder mystery train ride on George R.R. Martin's Sky Railway. So she's busy, I guess is what you could say.
Yeah, but I think she probably has room for a few more jobs.
No, don't you put that on her. God damn it. Don't you fill up her plate. Let her fill up her plate.
This was a good conversation about an album that is, I think a lot of people probably will remember for one particular single. But there's just it was fascinating to look back at this album now compared to the way I was perceiving this artist and the music at the time. And I think with Gracie we have a pretty good conversation breaking that all down and sort of sifting through what's what makes the artist great and what she had to put up with, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we can learn from it. What we can, not all albums or artists are cautionary tales, and even cautionary is kind of coded in a way, but I feel like it's just it's educational, and it is it'll hit you right in your heartstrings. So let's just let them listen to it, shall we?
Let's get right to it. Here we go.
Gracie Meier, thank you for joining us on This One Goes to 11. How are you, my friend?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. I'm doing well. Staying busy, but happy to have some time to chat.
The desert's treating you well?
The desert is treating me well. The wind is crazy. It's windy season now. We just had a bunch of snow and ice, and now it's all melted, but now going into sort of the windy season before monsoon season. The desert has a lot of seasons. People are led astray.
Like micro seasons, right? Isn't that kind of how they roll? Is like you get these little short
boop come in, kind of like like the monsoons. Like they're super super hard for the 5 minutes that of course you're walking to your car and then it stops.
I feel like my skin's drying out just talking about it. Tell us, Gracie, what album hath thou brought before the This One Goes to 11 tribunal today?
Thank you. I have brought today before the tribunal Back to Black, the deluxe version by Ms. Amy Winehouse.
Yes.
Excellent.
I feel like I should have known that this one would come up at some point, but I kind of forgot about it. I forget about Amy routinely.
Dang, sure. We just have, we have a short period to source information from, especially with her. And the media moves so quickly in general that it's if you're not there to put yourself in it constantly, it's just, you're out.
I'm sure we'll have much conversation about the media in this episode.
Yeah.
And, how they treated her. So,
that woman. Well, for those of you who may have forgotten about Amy Winehouse like I did, or are not familiar with her at all, we have everyone's favorite segment, which is just the thing that you need to refresh your memory on who Amy Winehouse is and what this album is, called The Beginner's Guide to Amy Winehouse and Back to Black in 60 Seconds. And today, our boy, Michael Osinski, is going to be doing the recap. Michael, did you come prepared?
Oh, I came correct, is what I came.
You came correct. That's what I like to hear.
Wow.
Yeah. And Gracie, you will have an opportunity to assess Michael's job at giving a little recap teaser about Amy and the album. So keep a sharp ear out and make sure he's doing his job. Michael, are you ready?
Got it.
I'm ready.
All right. You start in 3, 2, 1, go.
Amy Jade Winehouse was born in London in 1983 into a family that loved jazz music, with her father reportedly singing Sinatra to her when she was a child. She started singing at an early age and recorded a demo tape that found its way to Simon Fuller's 19 management. He's the guy responsible for all the idols. Her acclaimed debut album, Frank, leaned heavily on her jazz influences, with almost every track co-written by Winehouse. Fame had started to take its well-documented toll on her, with the British tabloids nipping at her heels, by the time she released 2006's Back to Black, which drew heavily from the sound of 50s and 60s girl groups and the 2000s sound of Camden Town. It also included her most famous single, Rehab, which literally describes the time her friend unsuccessfully tried to get her help, no thanks to her father. The album and the single won her a ton of awards, but it would be her last major release. Drug and alcohol addiction took over, along with an enabling boyfriend. Messy performances followed, and in 2011, just as she seemed to be recovering, her career was cut way too short. She died from an accidental alcohol overdose compounded by years of bulimia.
Oh, man.
Stunning. That was packed.
Let's go.
So how did I do, Gracie? If you had to evaluate me on any scale you want, a number scale, we've had people use colors. It's totally up to you.
I would give this probably like a 3.5 James Beard Awards out of 4.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We've never had a James Beard Award.
I was like, I could do Michelin star, but it's so obvious.
If you gave me 3.5 Michelin stars, that would be ridiculous. Because people strive for 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
James Beard Awards are a lot more approachable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think so.
We strive to be approachable here at This One Goes to 11, so we appreciate that.
Good. Accessibility is key.
Before we dive too much into the album, the first question we'd like to start out with, Gracie, is what is your relationship with music? Just in general, not specifically to this album.
I have a very long, I think very technical, intense at times relationship to music. My first music class was when I was 2 years old. And then I just, my parents were they're creatives as well. So they really kept me in, I was in a children's choir grades 1 through 4, and then a really intense children's choir grades like 5 through 12. I played the viola, and then I was like, nope, no thank you. And then I picked up trombone, and I've been playing that ever since. So trombone's my primary instrument, piano lessons, the whole deal. It's always just been around a lot. And I find I have a really easy time technically with music. So I do really enjoy getting to break down theory and just different, styles of improv. And yeah, I'm very lucky to sort of have that base to go from. So, and then I moved to Santa Fe, and it kind of just was this massive playground because, I've been singing my whole life, but I had never really belted. I had never sang loudly, surprisingly, until I got to Santa Fe. So it's sort of these past few years, I've been really exploring a different part of my voice. I got more proficient in piano for a role that we have in one of our shows. I learned the bass guitar mostly just because I wanted to be a hot girl who plays bass. I really sometimes you wanna, give yourself some cool points for absolutely no reason. I love the bass. It's just really fun, and when people are forming bands, they're always like, "Fuck, I need a bass player."
I was just about to say, everybody needs a bass player. Always.
Yep. We got a drummer in the ensemble. We've got some guitar players. I was like, let me fill this out.
Are you taking voice lessons currently?
That is I I don't do New Year's resolutions. I try to do monthly resolutions because, again, my attention span could not handle that. So my goal this year is to complete all of those every month. My goal for March is to get a voice teacher here in town, as well as representation, because I really should be hopping on that. There's a ton of film out here, obviously, deserts, cowboys. People love it.
That's really, it's really amazing that you're like kind of, I feel like most people when we ask them that question, they sort of attack it from the music that they listen to, the music that they consume. But I feel like you're one of the minority of people who's really attacked that question from the way that you make music and the way that you express yourself through it. And I got to say, the trombone has always been synonymous with you for me for many years, as long as we've known each other. So
that's wild.
I'm going to give you 76 trombones for that being your signature.
If I'm thinking about music in the house growing up, like that was all show tunes.
Which ones were you listening to as a kid?
Big ones in the house were Once on This Island, Ragtime. Those are certainly, I think, the two biggest. We would sing a lot of Les Mis at the piano. Mm-hmm. We got like borderline Partridgey in terms of how my family relates to music. Nice. We'd sit down at the piano after dinner and like play through a bunch of musicals and sing them. And once I graduated from like young Cosette to like older Cosette, my parents were like, "Oh my God, she's growing up."
Who was playing the piano in those moments?
I think that was my mom. Yeah, she's the one who sort of like me, like can sort of feel through and keep up and play, but like isn't technically, like wouldn't consider herself a pianist in that way.
Do you read music well?
I used to be able to sight read really well, which was sickening. But now it's I can look at letters and chords, and when I'm writing out music for myself, I'll kind of do it like in the trajectory that it would be on a staff, but I'll still just write the notes, like the letter notes. Yeah. So that's sort of how I've translated or moved things along later in my life. But I read the bass clef well.
Well, I hope you play bass.
And trombones in bass clef as well. So
was there anything besides show tunes that really dominated the airwaves in your house? I mean, anything that you can draw a line to connect like back then to where your musical tastes lie today?
It's hard to say that a lot of it came from the house beyond the love of theater, because I genuinely think like that was all that was playing, really. There was like, a couple, there's this local a cappella group called Blind Man's Bluff that we listened to all the time. It's just these like boys from, I think Buffalo Grove, Illinois. If you're listening.
Shout out Buffalo Grove.
Shout out Buffalo Grove, Illinois. So we listened, and it was a covers album. And I, as a child, I didn't know that. So I would hear all of these songs throughout my life and be like, why do I know this song? And then it turns out, it was a Blind Man's Bluff song that I just thought was theirs, but nope, it's 100% a covers album.
No way.
Like, I'm in the grocery store, I hear the Indigo Girls, and I'm like, oh my God, like having an absolute full circle moment, like next to the Whole Grains. So definitely that. I think the Beatles won. But a lot of my musical expansions started happening, honestly, when I discovered Amy Winehouse, because she really broke through the top 40 and had this sound that I'd never heard before. And then I, dated this boy in 7th grade who knew how to make mixtapes. And that just blew open possibility for, music sharing and types of music I could listen to. And that was the gateway, certainly.
So let's talk about Amy, right? Let's see. Do you remember the moment that you first discovered this album, or do you remember the first song you heard from it?
The first song I heard from the album was "You Know I'm No Good." I remember I was a big music video before school girly, like on VH1 or MTV. So I saw the video in company to the track, and that was my first time experiencing it. So not only was it this music, but it was this like really kind of, I don't even like, not disassociative, but like this cool kind of glazed music video with that like has all these rich colors and like cool cinematic dynamism. But Amy is still like really comfortable in her, dejection almost. And getting to see them at the same time, I think was really powerful for me, because I was like, she's cool. So that was definitely the first time. And then I think as the media started picking up Amy's sound and more, singles started dropping, I was like, oh yeah, like, and this is my girl. So I pretty quickly bought the vinyl, because I was, I think I was deep in the like early 2010s. Like I didn't have like an owl necklace, but I got close. You know what I mean? Like I was
sure.
Like I was really trying to be unique and find my stuff. You know, it's high school. I'm trying to, you know, find things that I resonate with. So I bought this vinyl. Sound ridiculous.
Yes, the vinyl revival. You were on the pulse there.
Hundo P, loved it. You know, had a big ass. You know, played tapes and like had an iPod Connect and a radio and a CD player, but also a record player like in the top. Oh, I lived luxuriously. It was amazing.
600 points for that.
And that album became like almost a daily practice for me because we had said earlier it's only 35 minutes, and so what I ended up doing was timing out my morning routine to this record. So I'd start it and I knew exactly how much time I had before, like I had to either like run to the bus stop or someone was picking me up or however I was getting to school that day. Just because I'm terrible with keeping track of time, especially when getting ready. So that was, you know, however, subconsciously, like always kind of how I started my mornings, which now that I'm saying out loud is like, oh God, like that's, I think darker than I realized. It's one of the, it's like, I keep sort of comparing it to queerness in the sense that like, if you come out later in your life, sometimes you go back and you're like, oh my, that was so gay. And like, it just went right over my head.
I say that every time, almost every episode on this show, I mention my love for the Pointer Sisters and Whitney Houston when I was little, and how did I not know I was a homosexual?
That's what I'm saying.
I understand.
Yeah. And I equate a lot of that to, I think, my relationship to Amy Winehouse. Like now that I'm looking back, I'm like, why did I like these songs so much? Like, what was it about this that resonated with me? And I was like, probably mental illness. Like probably it was saying something that I didn't yet have language for. And I was like, you know, why do I feel empathy? Why do I feel, you know, akin to this voice, to these lyrics, to things that I've never experienced in my life at this point? You know, I'm 15, 16, you know, I hadn't even had like, you know, a bad relationship yet, but it was, you know, all of this context for what that bad relationship could be, I think.
How much were you aware of who she was as a person, not just as an artist, and all the, you know, all, because there was a period of time that she was just constantly in the news, and not only just in the news because of things that had happened to her where like they had broken a law or something like that, but also in like late night talk shows were especially vicious to her, as well as just the British tabloids, which have a long history of being awful to celebrities. Like, how much were you aware of that?
Yeah, I certainly knew it was going on. And I remember seeing like tabloid images and trying to understand, like, honestly, like why she was being, you know, bothered and photographed this much. It hadn't totally clicked the type of exploitation that was happening around me because it was what I grew up in, you know. I was like, oh yeah, of course the paparazzi are like, you know, making it dangerous to leave your house. Like that's their job, or like that's what they do. And that was very much the status quo. So I think I realized it, but, you know, this was 2007, like, you know, we had Britney Spears in the media. We had so much going through the circuit, so that to see these tabloids of these celebrities looking really messy, like this was the era where you had, you know, Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, and somebody else like in a car, just like absolutely slumped, and which is fine. It's absolutely fine. But then to, you know, have all of that be documented and reflected in, you know, what people think of you and your self-worth is just, you know, it's very easy to see how isolating and how destructive that type of attention can be.
I think I was not entirely, I didn't remember how vicious it was. I mean, we were young, and it did seem very normal. It did seem very much like you know, it makes you think that maybe there was part of us that thought it was kind of like the cost of doing business, you know, to be a celebrity like that. If that was sort of conditioned into us, that you're like, well, if you're going to be a celebrity, then you're just going to have to be hounded by these people. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I wonder, I was thinking about this after I watched the documentary about her the other day, where it does kind of feel like the new generation of pop stars that's coming up now or they have so much different of an understanding of their relationship with media than she did at the time, or it's just fundamentally different and more aware of the dangers and probably thanks in no small part to her tragic, you know, untimely passing, that can happen, which makes me happy. It makes me happy that Zoomer artists may have a bit more tools.
Media training. Yeah. It's almost like built-in PR training. You know, you can handle the like literal intensity of these flashes of people recording you because, you know, you may be recording it back your whole life.
I mean, not just media training. I would say like mental health training, just because the whole conversation around mental health has changed so much that now it's, I mean, like I was thinking even recently about how John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, like announced that he's in Walter Reed, I think, being treated for depression right now. And I think about like even just 10 years ago, I don't think a politician would have ever come forward and said that or admitted to that. And that's a politician, let alone someone who's like enjoying the sort of celebrity that, a pop star is enjoying.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible in that sense. People get that language earlier in their life. The internet allows people to see themselves in a much wider net. And I think that's cool.
Mm-hmm. So with Amy, and I guess with musicians and artists in general, would you say that you're the kind of person who like strikes up a relationship with an artist and you kind of like do a deep dive on them and go obsessive? Like, do you like try to find out as much about their life as you can, or do you sort of maybe separate the two things a little bit more?
Ooh, I don't know. I feel like the point in my life where I was when I discovered Amy was definitely when I was going on deeper dives, because, anytime you found information, it was like, oh my God, suddenly there's, you look up one thing about old Hollywood and then you're like, oh my, there's so many stories to like uncover here. So I think not so much rabbit hole as like wormhole of just like different like tangents and ways that the artist's music and their life can sort of bring those things into the forefront. So definitely that.
Yeah, I think she had such a particular style even for that time. Like it was very like the hair and all that that kind of thing. There was nobody that really was doing that at that time, and it seems like she bore it like a badge of honor. That she was like,
quite naturally.
She kept saying things, and like she kept saying things about writing real music. Were you aware of that? Did that mean anything to you at the time?
Certainly not at the time, but looking back at it, especially now that we can sort of compare her earlier album, Frank, to this one, because I mean, there's such a difference in the way that the songs were constructed, in where she was in her life, her relationship to her managers. It really, really strikes them like as different.
I will say from watching the documentary too, which I highly recommend people watch if you haven't watched it, but it's just, I think something that they do a really good job of is the whole like first third to first half. Amy is very much front and center, like the Amy that existed before all the celebrity. And so she's very much not just the star of the documentary, but the voice of the documentary. And then somewhere midway through, you just stop hearing from her as much, because now any interviews that she does, it's like she's under the influence, or she's responding to some allegation, or she's being hounded by media. And so it just becomes the only things we learn about her are from other people and not from her directly, which I think is really telling in terms of the way that, I don't know, the way that we received her. And I don't know. I will say, when I had to re-listen to this album for this episode, the song Rehab made me very angry when I listened to it again for the first time, because I'm like, she is saying right out here like how she needs help. Even though the words are saying otherwise, it is abundantly clear she needs help. And the number of people who failed her in that moment is astonishing to me.
Yeah, every time I get to the line, and if my daddy thinks I'm fine, I'm like, oh, it just, talk about a proponent or a big force in her life of, working instead of healing, and just trying to figure out that dynamic.
Did you ever listen to her album with Tony Bennett?
No. I've listened to Body and Soul.
Yeah.
But it is wild.
I think it's pretty bad.
And watching her record it is, you're like, oh, I guess that's why it was happening. Like, she was just so, it's often the most talented people who are the most critical and the most nervous. And, she's singing with Tony Bennett, her idol, the person who announced her as Record of the Year at the Grammys. Like, it's this very built up relationship for her. So, yeah, I'm like, I'd be nervous too. Shit.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. It's weird. But it's strange to see them in a room together. It's
such a clean room too. It's so soft. Like it feels almost clinical to a point where you're like, is this what it would look like? I mean, honestly, to keep Amy in an environment that we're not used to seeing her in, it's not the streets of Camden. It's not on a stage, like not sure where she's going to move.
Have you ever publicly sung an Amy Winehouse song?
That's a great question. I don't think so. Surprisingly. Really? Yeah. Well,
I can see you doing that, Gracie. Come on.
Me too. Literally. Now that you're saying that, I'm like, what am I doing? That's like, I had a friend who was like, you should be in a Blondie cover band. I was like, I don't even know a Blondie song. And then she listed like 6 Blondie songs. And I was like, no, I know all those songs for sure, actually. So.
I'm going to give you 900 points for doing that. For 900 points for the possibility of you being in a Blondie cover band.
I'll entertain it. But truly, I haven't even like done a Valeria karaoke moment. I am very surprised because I do really love where her music sits in my voice now, currently. And that's when I do notice like closer friends. Like if I was having trouble singing something, I don't remember what it was for some event. And my friend was like, well, just sing it like how Amy would sing it. Cause that's when like your voice really shines. And I was like, oh, like when I get to not think about technique as much and I just kind of get to play with phrasing and, access, what she could channel so naturally.
Well, what do you think it was? What do you think it was that she had access to that set her apart from other singers at the time?
I mean, it does feel so natural. It feels like it was innate. It feels like it's something that really is like born out of her, which you get to see a lot more almost after her death, because that's when we see artists like Adele and Duffy and Estelle like really take on those aesthetics and even take on some of that, soul-bearing type of context. But, what about it strikes it differently? It's that Amy just had this channel from her soul to her voice, I think, that just like had absolute abandon. Every live performance she's singing around the song because she's a jazz singer and she trusts herself to serve as an instrument within her songs. And I think that's just, some of that's training, but I don't think she had a lot of vocal training. She went to theater school. I do know that.
And there would be no Adele today if Amy Winehouse hadn't existed. So
a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, we've kept our listeners in suspense long enough. So, Gracie, tell us, what have you chosen as your standout track from the album?
Sure. So my standout track from Back to Black is Addicted. It is the last track on the album. And this was like a Berenstain Bear moment trying to prepare for this episode because I was
Say more.
Because in my head, I was like, oh, like that was why I chose the deluxe version actually, is because I was like, oh, Addicted's on the deluxe version. I don't know it to be on the album. And then I looked at the album on Spotify and Addicted was the last track. And I was like, when has this always been on the album? I was so confused. And then I found a picture of the vinyl and I was like, okay, great. I'm not crazy. It only has 10 tracks on the vinyl. And then I found out that Addicted was added in the expanded version of the album, which is different from the deluxe version of the album. I'll have you know.
Oh yeah.
So this was like a crazy goose chase. I'm like, what is? Yeah. So I really love the way the song has come into my life later in my life because it wasn't on the record originally. So I didn't grow up listening to this one as much. This one came like in the past few years, but I just think it does. I love it as a final track. I think He Can Only Hold Her is also a really cool final track because of the way that, the whole album is in first person and then she gets to that song and then it's in third person for the first time. And you're like, oh, that feels like, some type of resolution. But then we get Addicted and it just has like all of those things that I think I love about Amy Winehouse. It has this really cheeky sort of coloring to the lyrics, really modern, like hip hop influences, especially in the lyricism as well. It has that groove. It has not even a resignation, but just sort of this like, she's like, I smoke weed and it does more than any dick did. And I'm fine with that. Like, I will do that and you do you. And I think the like almost contentness in this sort of cycle, I don't know, I think always brought me comfort too. Just hearing this song as I am later in my life, I'm like, oh yeah, wow, yeah, that's not me.
Checks a lot of boxes.
It's just like they, once you start looking for them, they come from all over. I'm like, oh, she was, 5'2", 5'3", cool. Oh, she was Jewish, cool. Oh, she went to theater school, cool. Like it's, it's all those small things where I'm just like, damn, I'm not I'm not this woman, but things are happening.
Let's listen to Addicted, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more after the break.
That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.